$3,000 of Korean liquor, one clumsy step, 6 words in a language she was never supposed to speak. That's all it took for Suzanne Polly to go from invisible waitress to dead woman walking. Here's what you need to understand. Suzanne wasn't clumsy. She was exhausted. 26 years old, 3 hours of sleep, 16-hour shifts, watching her entire world collapse in slow motion while serving champagne to people who spent more on dinner than her father's weekly cancer treatments. And she wasn't just any waitress. She was a weapon hiding in plain sight. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Now, back to the night Suzanne Polly destroyed her carefully invisible life with 6 words in Korean. It's 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, and Hwaryong restaurant is buzzing with the kind of power that doesn't announce itself. You know the type of place. No sign on the door, no prices on the menu, no questions asked about the men in private rooms who arrive with security details and leave with briefcases full of things that aren't paperwork. This is where Manhattan's elite come to do business nobody can know about. Politicians, hedge fund criminals, corporate sharks, and occasionally actual organized crime bosses who figured out that the best way to hide is in plain sight among people just as dirty as you are. Suzanne Polly moves through this world like she doesn't exist. Because for the last 8 months, she's made damn sure nobody sees her. She's 26, single mother, drowning. Her father has terminal pancreatic cancer, the kind that devours $15,000 a month in experimental treatments that insurance laughs at covering. Her mother was diagnosed with early onset dementia 6 months ago and needs round-the-clock supervision Suzanne can't afford. She's $8,400 behind on rent. Her landlord gave her 7 days to pay, or he's filing eviction papers. Her 8-year-old son River just got his third truancy warning because Suzanne keeps pulling him out of school to stay with her mother when the care aide doesn't show up. One more warning and social services starts asking questions Suzanne can't answer. So yeah, drowning doesn't quite cover it. But here's the thing nobody knows. Not her manager, not her coworkers, not the entitled millionaire she serves every night. Suzanne chose this restaurant deliberately. Because Hwaryong is Manhattan's premier Korean fusion spot, and Suzanne speaks fluent Korean. Her late grandmother taught her during childhood summers in Busan. Not tourist Korean. Not classroom Korean. Real Seoul dialect. Business Korean. The kind you use to negotiate deals and settle debts and discuss things you don't want Americans understanding. Her Halmoni had been obsessive about it, drilling pronunciation and grammar into Suzanne until it was perfect, making her memorize phrases that seemed random until years later when Suzanne realized they were trade terms, shipping routes, organizational structures. Languages are weapons, Suzanne her grandmother used to say, her voice going sharp the way it did when she talked about the Korea she'd left behind. The most powerful people never expect you to understand them. That's when they tell the truth. Suzanne never understood what her grandmother was running from. She died when Suzanne was 15, taking her secrets to the grave, leaving behind only a safety deposit box key and instructions Suzanne's mother lost during her first dementia episode. But she left Suzanne the language, and Suzanne has been using it to survive. For 8 months, she's worked at Hwaryong, invisible and perfect, serving Korean businessmen and their associates, listening to them discuss stock movements, real estate plays, insider information they'd never say in English. She's made small wins, a stock tip that paid for 2 weeks of groceries, a real estate rumor that helped her negotiate with her landlord, scraps, breadcrumbs, nothing big enough to stop the bleeding, but enough to keep her from going under completely. Tonight was supposed to be like every other night. Serve the elite. Listen carefully. Stay invisible. Go home to her sleeping son and her confused mother and her father who started asking about hospice care because the treatments aren't working anymore. But then Manager Kwan finds her in the service corridor, and his face has that look, the one that means something bad is about to get worse. Polly, private room 4. VIP party just arrived. You're their server. Suzanne's stomach drops. Where's Mina? She handles private rooms. Mina called in sick. You're up. Kwan's hands are shaking as he adjusts his tie, and Kwan never shakes. Listen to me very carefully. The man at that table is named Dong Hyun. You do not speak to him unless he speaks to you first. You do not make eye contact. You do not exist. You are hands that pour drinks and a body that disappears. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Who is he? He's nobody, Kwan hisses, and the way he says it makes it clear Dong Hyun is very much somebody. Nobody you want noticing you. Nobody you want remembering your face. This man, Kwan's voice drops to a whisper. This man makes people disappear, Suzanne. Professionally. So you serve, you smile, you vanish. Clear? Crystal clear. Terrifying, but clear. Suzanne grabs the wine service, a 2019 Hwangam Bogji that costs $3,000 a bottle, more than she makes in 2 weeks, and pushes through the lacquered doors into private room 4. The temperature drops when she enters. Not literally, but it feels like it. The air gets heavier, thicker, like the room itself knows something dangerous is happening. And sitting at the head of the table, surrounded by 4 men who radiate violence in expensive suits, is Dong Hyun. He's younger than she expected. Early 30s maybe. Sharp Korean features, the kind that could be handsome if they weren't so severe. Dark hair styled perfectly, ink crawling up his neck from beneath a charcoal suit that probably costs more than her car. But it's his eyes that make Suzanne's breath catch. Black. Empty. The kind of empty that comes from seeing too much death and being the reason for most of it. This isn't just a businessman, this is a predator who learned to wear a suit. He's speaking rapid Korean with 3 men, one older, silver-haired, clearly an advisor, 2 younger, enforcers trying to look civilized. Suzanne catches fragments as she approaches. Shipment clears customs Thursday, Newark Port Authority already paid off. Route through Palisades distribution. Federal crimes, plural, discussed like grocery lists. Her hands stay steady as she approaches. Her face stays blank. She is furniture. She is invisible. She is nothing. She reaches for the bottle to pour, and that's when it happens. The carpet edge catches her shoe. Just a thread. A tiny imperfection. Completely lethal. The bottle tilts in slow motion, and Suzanne watches $3,000 of premium Korean liquor arc through the air like liquid gold, beautiful and catastrophic, and splash directly onto Dong Hyun's polished Italian leather shoes. The room doesn't just go quiet. It dies. Every conversation stops mid-word. Every enforcer's hand moves toward a concealed weapon. The advisor's face goes pale. Manager Kwan appears in the doorway and makes a sound like a man watching his own execution. And Dong Hyun, very slowly, with the kind of control that's more terrifying than rage, lifts his eyes from his ruined $1,200 shoes to Suzanne's face. For 3 seconds, he just stares. Empty eyes, calculating, deciding whether she's worth the effort of violence. Then he speaks, not in English, in Korean. Rapid Seoul dialect, harsh and cutting. Ah, Sabal. Fuck. Then louder to his associate, but meant for her to hear. Stupid bitch. Clumsy as a dog and just as useless. This is what happens when you hire half-breed trash. Look at her. Pathetic American incompetence. She probably can't even spell her own name. She'd make me laugh if she wasn't such a worthless whore. His associates laugh nervously. The advisor shifts uncomfortably. Kwan is already moving forward with apologies and cleaning cloths, but Suzanne doesn't move. Because something inside her, something that's been bending under impossible weight for weeks, months, years, finally snaps. She's thinking about her father, skeleton thin and asking about hospice, her mother who didn't recognize her yesterday, her son who asked why they're always moving, why they can't stay anywhere, why mommy cries in the bathroom. She's thinking about 8 months of being invisible, 8 months of swallowing insults and smiling through humiliation. 8 months of desperate eavesdropping that's yielded nothing big enough to matter. She's thinking about her grandmother's voice. Languages are weapons, Susanna. And she realizes she has nothing left to lose. Suzanne sets down the bottle with deliberate, terrifying calm. She straightens, and when she speaks, her voice cuts through the room like a blade. Dong-hyun-si, she says, in absolutely perfect Seoul dialect, using the formal honorific that commands respect. I apologize sincerely for your shoes. However, my apparently worthless half-breed brain understood every filthy word you just said, including the part about the Newark shipment route clearing customs this Thursday through paid-off Port Authority. That's conspiracy, customs fraud, and about 4 other federal charges. So perhaps you should reconsider who's actually stupid in this room. Time stops. Dong-hyun's face drains of all color. His hand, reaching for his water glass, freezes in midair. His eyes, those dead, calculating eyes, suddenly fill with something Suzanne has never seen in a man like him. Raw shock. And underneath it, genuine fear. Because he just got called out, in his own language for federal crimes, by a waitress he thought was furniture. The advisor's mouth falls open. The enforcers look like they've seen a ghost. Kwan makes a choking sound. And Suzanne stands there, heart hammering, knowing she just made the bravest or stupidest decision of her life. Probably both. Dong-hyun rises from his chair slowly, like a predator deciding whether to strike or retreat. He's tall, taller than she realized. When he takes a step toward her, every instinct screams at Suzanne to run, but she holds her ground. Because what's he going to do? Kill her? At least her life insurance would cover River's education. Ioteoke. His voice cracks. He clears his throat, switches fully to Korean. How does an American waitress speak Seoul dialect? This isn't possible. Suzanne lifts her chin. Defiant. Possibly insane. Definitely done being invisible. Ne halmeo niga garocheo jushosoyo, she answers quietly. My grandmother taught me. She left Korea 40 years ago, from a family you and your organization seem very familiar with. Dong-hyun's expression changes. Something flickers behind those empty eyes. Recognition? Calculation? Suzanne can't tell. But what he says next changes everything. What was your grandmother's name? And Suzanne realizes her grandmother's secrets, the ones she took to her grave, are about to claw their way back into the light. Because 20 minutes later, Suzanne is fired. Manager Kwan won't even look at her. Security escorts her out through the kitchen. 2 hours after that, there's a knock on her apartment door. A man in an expensive suit with cold eyes introduces himself as Tae-sung. He works for Dong-hyun, and he has an offer. 3 weeks of translation work, archaic Gyeongsang dialect, messages from a rival organization. The pay is $750,000. Suzanne's brain short-circuits. That's enough to save her father, her mother, River, everything. And if I refuse? Tae-sung's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Your son's school records might reveal some troubling inconsistencies. Your landlord might receive anonymous complaints. Your father's insurance company might suddenly audit his coverage. There it is. The threat wrapped in velvet. Why me? Because you speak a dialect that Dong-hyun barely understands. Because you're desperate enough to be useful, but smart enough to stay quiet. And because... Tae-sung pulls out a photograph, slides it across her coffee table. Your grandmother's maiden name appears in our files, connected to something that happened in 1985, something Dong-hyun needs to understand before it kills him. Suzanne picks up the photograph. It's old, faded but clear enough. Her grandmother, young, standing next to a Korean man in an expensive suit. They're smiling. The man has his arm around her waist. She's never seen this photo. Doesn't recognize the man. Who is he? Dong-hyun's grandfather, Taesung says quietly. Murdered in 1985 by his own brother. Your grandmother was there. She saw it happen. And then she disappeared to America, taking evidence nobody's been able to find for 40 years. The room tilts. Suzanne's grandmother wasn't just running from Korea. She was running from murder, from a crime family, from violence that's apparently not finished with their bloodline. The translation job, Suzanne whispers. What's it really for? Taesung stands. To find out who's trying to kill Dong-hyun before they finish what his uncle started. You have until morning to decide. After that, the offer expires. And so do your other options. He leaves. The door closes. Suzanne sits in her dark apartment, holding a photograph of her dead grandmother and a man who was murdered, staring at 750,000 reasons to say yes, and 1,000 reasons she should run. But here's the thing about being desperate. You don't run when salvation shows up wearing a suit and making threats. You take the deal. You walk into the darkness. You hope you come out alive. And maybe, just maybe, you find out the truth about the woman who taught you that languages are weapons. So Suzanne makes her choice. And 3 days later, she's standing in a fortress-like penthouse in Koreatown, translating century-old Korean dialect for a crime boss who might be her distant cousin, uncovering family secrets that were supposed to stay buried, and realizing her grandmother's past is about to become her very dangerous present. Want to know what she finds? What her grandmother was really hiding? Why Dong-hyun's been watching her for months before that restaurant catastrophe? Because the truth is going to change everything Suzanne thought she knew about her family, her grandmother, and the blood debt that's been waiting 40 years to be paid. Let me tell you what happened next. Manager Kwan fires her before she even reaches the kitchen. You're done. Get your things. Leave through the back. His voice shakes, won't meet her eyes. I can't help you, Suzanne. I have a family. Just go. The other servers stare as she walks past. Nobody says goodbye. Nobody asks what happened. They just watch her grab her purse from her locker and disappear into the November cold, like she was never there at all. The subway ride home feels like drowning in slow motion. Suzanne sits in the fluorescent light, still wearing her server uniform, replaying the moment over and over. The look on Dong-hyun's face. The way the room went silent. The way she just destroyed the only income keeping her family from complete collapse. $700 a week. Gone. Just like that. Her apartment building looks worse at 11 p.m. than it does in daylight. Cracked concrete, flickering hallway lights, the smell of mildew and desperation. She climbs 3 flights of stairs because the elevator's been broken for 2 months, and her landlord stopped pretending to care. The eviction notice is taped to her door, bright orange. Impossible to miss. Final notice, 7 days to vacate. She rips it down, unlocks the door, and steps into her tiny apartment. River is asleep at the kitchen table, his head pillowed on his math homework. Her mother sits on the couch, staring at a blank television, humming a song Suzanne doesn't recognize. Mom? Suzanne touches her shoulder gently. It's late. Let's get you to bed. Her mother looks up, confused. Have you seen my daughter? She's supposed to pick me up from school. Suzanne's chest tightens. I'm right here, Mom. I'm Suzanne. Oh. Her mother smiles vaguely. You look like someone I used to know. Suzanne gets her mother settled, then carries River to his bed. He doesn't wake up. 8 years old and already learning to sleep through chaos. She kisses his forehead, closes his door, and returns to the kitchen table. The bills are waiting. Medical statements, credit card minimums, rent arrears, utilities about to be shut off. She opens her laptop and checks her bank account. $342. Her father's next treatment is in 6 days. Cost, $15,000. She starts making a list of things she can sell. Her laptop, her grandmother's jewelry, her car if she can find a buyer who'll pay more than scrap value. Total potential, maybe $4,000. Enough to delay the inevitable by 2 weeks. The knock on her door comes at 11:47 p.m. 3 sharp raps. Professional. Not police. Not a neighbor. Suzanne looks through the peephole and sees a man in an expensive black coat, hands clasped in front of him, patient as death. She opens the door with the chain still attached. "I don't want whatever you're selling. Miss Polly." His voice is calm, measured. "My name is Tae-sung. I work for Dong-hyun. May I come in?" Every instinct screams no. But Suzanne opens the door anyway, because women who are drowning don't get to be cautious. Tae-sung enters like he's assessing real estate. Takes in the cramped space, the peeling wallpaper, the eviction notice crumpled on the counter. He doesn't sit, just stands in her kitchen, radiating controlled threat. "You speak Gyeongsang dialect," he says. Not a question. "My grandmother's village dialect. Why?" Tae-sung pulls a folder from his coat, slides it across her counter. Inside are photographs of handwritten documents, old Korean script, dense and archaic. Intercepted communications from a rival organization, written in Gyeongsang dialect that our current translators cannot decode accurately. Dong-hyun needs someone who understands not just the words, but the cultural context, the implications. "I'm a waitress, not a translator." "You were a waitress. Now you're unemployed." Tae-sung's expression doesn't change. 3 weeks of work. Decode these messages. Provide analysis. The compensation is $750,000. Suzanne's brain short-circuits. That number doesn't exist in her world. Why me? Because you're desperate. Because you're fluent in a dialect Dong-hyun barely speaks. And because your grandmother's name appears in our files connected to events from 1985 that we need to understand. He pulls out another folder. This one contains River's school records, attendance reports, truancy warnings, a draft CPS complaint with her name on it. "These don't have to be filed," Tae-sung says quietly. "Your landlord's anonymous complaint about unsafe living conditions doesn't have to be submitted. Your father's insurance audit doesn't have to proceed, but only if you accept." Rage floods through Suzanne, hot and clarifying. "You're blackmailing me with my son. We're offering you a choice. Take the job, save your family, or refuse and watch everything collapse in the next 72 hours. There is no third option." Suzanne looks at River's closed bedroom door, at her mother humming in the next room, at the medical bills that will never stop coming. "One condition," she says, her voice hard as stone. "My son is completely untouchable. You don't investigate him, threaten him, or breathe near him. If anything happens to River, I disappear, and you lose your translator. Understood?" Tae-sung almost smiles. "Dong-hyun said you would negotiate. He likes that. A car will pick you up tomorrow at 8 a.m. Bring nothing. We'll provide everything you need." He leaves. The door closes. Suzanne stands in her kitchen, shaking, knowing she just made a deal that will either save her family or destroy what's left of her soul, maybe both. At 7:55 a.m., a black sedan pulls up outside her building. Suzanne kisses River goodbye, tells her mother's aide she'll be working different hours, and slides into the back seat. They drive to Koreatown, not to a restaurant or an office, to a residential tower with security that makes TSA look casual. The penthouse elevator requires a keycard and a fingerprint scan. The doors open onto a space that shouldn't exist in New York. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Minimalist furniture that costs more than her yearly salary. Screens covering one wall displaying security feeds, financial data, shipping manifests. And standing at the window, backlit by morning sun, is Dong-hyun. He turns when she enters. Studies her the way you'd study a weapon you're not sure you can control. "Miss Polly?" His English is perfect, barely accented. "Welcome to your new workplace. Let's find out if your grandmother taught you enough to keep you alive." The documents are older than Suzanne expected. Photocopies of handwritten letters, some dating back decades, written in Gyeongsang dialect so thick and rural it takes her 20 minutes to decode the first paragraph. She sits at a glass table in Donghyun's penthouse, surrounded by screens and silence, translating phrases her grandmother used to mutter while cooking. Idioms about harvest seasons that actually mean shipment schedules. Proverbs about family loyalty that encode organizational hierarchy. This one, she says, pointing to a line that's been puzzling her. It's not about rice planting. It's about moving product through Gwangju ports during off-season when customs is understaffed. Donghyun leans over her shoulder, close enough that she can smell his cologne, expensive and sharp. You're certain? My grandmother used the same phrasing when she talked about her village. Different context, same structure. Suzanne highlights another section. And this mentions the Gwangju faction. Your rivals? Something flickers across Donghyun's face. Not rivals. Family. Suzanne looks up sharply. What? The Gwangju faction is led by my uncle Jaewon, my father's brother. This isn't a territorial war. It's a family destroying itself over something that happened 40 years ago. He straightens, moves to the window. Keep translating. Tell me what else you find. Hours pass. Suzanne's eyes burn from staring at faded handwriting, her brain aching from switching between dialects. But she finds patterns, references to a murder in 1985, mentions of a witness who fled to America, phrases about blood debt and family shame. Then she finds it. A fragment of a letter that makes her blood run cold. The translator's daughter carries proof. She must not return. Her hands shake as she translates the full passage. Dong-hyun, this letter talks about someone who witnessed your grandfather's murder. A translator who worked for your family. It says she fled to America with evidence. He's beside her instantly. When was this written? 1985, August. Suzanne's throat goes dry. My grandmother left Korea in August 1985. She was a translator. The silence stretches, heavy and dangerous. What was her name? Dong-hyun's voice is quiet, controlled, but Suzanne hears the edge underneath. Park Ji-won. She married my grandfather in New York and took his name, Fisher. Suzanne looks up at him. She never talked about Korea, never explained why she left. She just taught me the language and told me it was important to remember where we came from. Dong-hyun pulls out his phone, makes a call in rapid Korean. Within minutes, Tae-sung arrives with a box of files. Old immigration records, photographs, documents in Korean and English. There, in a 1985 work permit application, is her grandmother's face. Young, serious, standing beside an older Korean man in an expensive suit. That's my grandfather, Dong-hyun says quietly. She was his personal translator. She was there the night he was murdered by his own brother. Suzanne stares at the photograph, her grandmother's eyes looking back at her across 40 years. She witnessed it? And then disappeared before anyone could silence her. My family searched for her for years. We thought she was dead. Dong-hyun's jaw tightens. She wasn't running from Korea. She was running from us. The weight of it crashes over Suzanne, her grandmother's secretiveness, the strange phrases she used to whisper. The safety deposit box key she'd left behind that her mother lost during a dementia episode. It was all connected to this, to murder, to a crime family, to blood and violence her grandmother had spent 40 years trying to escape. The evidence she took, Suzanne whispers. What was it? Proof that Jaewon's father committed the murder. Photographs, documents, a recorded confession. Enough to destroy him and legitimize my grandfather's chosen heir, my father. Dong-hyun looks at her with something like recognition. Your grandmother didn't just witness history, she held the key to our entire organization's power structure. And now Jaewon wants it back. Now Jaewon wants it destroyed, and anyone connected to it eliminated. He studies her face. including you. Fear spikes through Suzanne, sharp and cold. River, my son, is already under protection. Tae-sung placed a security detail on him this morning. Your mother too. Chae-won doesn't know about you yet, but he will. Dong-hyun's expression hardens. Which means we move faster. You'll work from different locations. Brooklyn Safe House tonight, Fort Lee tomorrow. We keep you moving until we find what your grandmother hid. I don't know where it is. She never told me. But you know the language, the dialect, the way she thought. He hands her another stack of documents. These are personal letters from my grandfather to your grandmother. Love letters. If anyone can decode where she hid the evidence, it's you. Suzanne takes the letters, her hands trembling. Her grandmother had been in love with a crime boss, had witnessed his murder, had fled across the world carrying secrets that could destroy families. And now, 40 years later, those secrets were clawing their way back into the light through her granddaughter. One question, Suzanne says quietly. When this is over, when we find the evidence, what happens to me and my family? Dong-hyun meets her eyes. For the first time since the restaurant, she sees something other than cold calculation, something almost human. That depends on what we find, and whether you survive long enough to see it. Not reassuring, but honest. Suzanne opens the first love letter, written in her grandmother's hand, and begins translating the past into a future she's not sure she'll live to see. The love letters tell a story Suzanne's grandmother never wanted anyone to know. She translates them in a Brooklyn safe house, rain hammering against bulletproof windows, Dong-hyun pacing behind her like a caged animal. Each letter is more devastating than the last. My dearest Ji-won, tonight I told my wife I'm leaving her. My brother says I'm destroying the family for a translator. Let them say what they want. You carry my child. That makes you more family than blood ever did. Suzanne's hands freeze on the page. Dong-hyun, this letter is dated March 1985. My mother was born in December 1985. He stops pacing. Read it again. She does, her voice shaking. Your grandfather was in love with my grandmother. She was pregnant with his child when he was murdered. The silence that follows is suffocating. Dong-hyun moves to the window, his reflection ghostly in the rain-streaked glass. My grandfather had no legitimate daughters, only two sons, my father and my uncle Jae-won. If your mother was his daughter, then my mother is your aunt, and you and I are cousins. Suzanne sets down the letter carefully, like it might explode. My grandmother wasn't just a witness. She was carrying proof of an affair that would have torn your family apart. So my great-uncle killed my grandfather to protect family honor, and your grandmother fled to America with evidence and a baby. Dong-hyun's voice is hollow. She wasn't running from murder. She was running from being murdered. Suzanne finds another letter, this one dated 2 days before the assassination. Her grandmother's handwriting, desperate and rushed. He knows about the baby. Your brother came to me today and said if I don't disappear, both the child and I will. He said you're weak for loving a woman beneath your station. He said he'll fix your mistake. I'm leaving tonight. I'm taking the evidence. If anything happens to you, the world will know the truth. She tried to warn him, Suzanne whispers. She knew it was coming and tried to save him. Dong-hyun slams his fist against the window. The glass doesn't crack, but the sound echoes like a gunshot. 40 years. 40 years my family has been built on lies. Chae-won's father murdered my grandfather, took control of the organization, and spent decades hunting the only witness who could expose him. Your grandfather set up a trust fund. Suzanne pulls out another document, this one legal and formal. For my mother, $4.2 million, managed by a neutral third party. He knew something might happen. He tried to protect her. And someone buried it. Someone made sure your family suffered. Dong-hyun turns, and for the first time since the restaurant, his mask completely cracks. She sees rage underneath, grief, betrayal. Where's the evidence? Flushing Savings Bank. Safety deposit box registered under her maiden name, Park Ji-won. But there's a genealogical lock. Only direct descendants with DNA proof can access it. Which means you. Which means me. Suzanne meets his eyes. She made sure only her bloodline could retrieve it. She was protecting it for us. Dong-hyun's phone rings. He answers in Korean, his expression darkening with each word. When he hangs up, his voice is ice. Jae-won knows. One of his informants saw you entering this building. He's mobilized his people. NYPD officers on his payroll are watching the bank. He's offering $2 million for you, alive, before you can access that box. Fear floods through Suzanne, cold and paralyzing. River, my mother. Already moved to a secure location. Tae-sung has them in a safe house in Jersey with armed security. He moves toward her and his voice drops. But you're the target now. You're the only person who can legally access evidence that will destroy Jae-won's entire legacy. Then we go to the bank. We get the evidence. We end this. It's a trap. He'll be waiting. Good. Suzanne stands, surprising herself with her own steadiness. Let him wait. Because I'm tired of running from family secrets and blood debts that aren't mine to carry. Dong-hyun studies her like he's seeing her for the first time. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, but my grandmother spent 40 years afraid, and it cost her everything. It cost my mother a father. It cost me a family I never knew I had. She steps closer. You say you want war with Jae-won. I don't believe you. I think you want the truth. I think you want to know if your family is worth saving, or if it needs to burn. For a long moment, he doesn't speak. Then, quietly, what if the answer is both? Then we burn it together and build something better from the ashes. Suzanne's voice is steady now, certain. My grandmother ran. I'm not her. I'm going to that bank, I'm getting that evidence, and I'm ending what she started 40 years ago. Dong-hyun's expression shifts, something like respect, maybe even partnership. Then we do this my way, tactical team, controlled environment. We assume Jae-won has corrupted law enforcement positioned at every entrance. He pulls out his phone, starts making calls. And Suzanne, if this goes wrong, if they get to you before we get the evidence, they won't. If they do, River and your mother stay protected. That's my promise. Blood to blood. Cousin to cousin, Suzanne thinks. Family bound by violence and secrets. Trying to break a cycle 40 years in the making. She just hopes they survive long enough to see it through. The bank is closed when they arrive at 2 a.m., but Tae-sung has keys that shouldn't exist and security codes that change every hour. Suzanne walks through the silent lobby, flanked by Dong-hyun and 4 armed men who move like shadows, their eyes scanning every corner for threats that haven't materialized yet. The vault manager meets them in the basement, nervous and overpaid for his midnight cooperation. He leads Suzanne to box 447, registered to Park Ji-won, unopened since 1985. Fingerprint and DNA confirmation, he says, setting up a scanner. Suzanne presses her thumb to the reader. A needle pricks her finger for blood sample analysis. 30 seconds that feel like hours. Then the light turns green. The box slides open. Inside, photographs of a murder scene, blood on expensive carpet, ledgers documenting payments to officials, routes, territories, and a cassette tape labeled in her grandmother's handwriting, Confession, August 15th, 1985. This is it, Suzanne whispers, gathering everything into a document bag. This is what she died protecting. That's when she hears it. 2 voices in the stairwell, speaking Gyeongsang dialect, thick and rural, the kind Dong-hyun barely understands but Suzanne learned at her grandmother's knee. Basement level sealed, 6 targets inside. Wait for the signal, then breach from both staircases. The woman comes out alive. Everyone else is expendable. Suzanne grabs Donghyun's arm. We're surrounded. Stairwells north and south. They're waiting for a signal to breach. They want me alive. Everyone else dead. Donghyun's expression hardens. He signals Tae-sung, switches to English. North and south stairs compromised. How many? Suzanne listens carefully. At least 8, maybe more in the parking garage. We go through the garage. Tae-sung, get the van to sublevel 2. We move in 90 seconds. They run. Through security doors and maintenance corridors, Suzanne clutching the evidence bag like her life depends on it. Because it does. They burst into the underground parking garage just as the stairwell doors explode open behind them. Muzzle flashes, concrete chips spraying. Tae-sung returns fire, covering their retreat toward the black van screeching around the corner. Then the overhead lights cut out. Emergency generators kick in, bathing everything in red, and Jaewon steps out from behind a concrete pillar, flanked by men in NYPD uniforms who aren't here to protect anyone. Suzanne Poley. His voice echoes through the garage, calm and poisonous. The granddaughter. You look like her, you know. Ji-won. She had the same defiant eyes before we made her disappear. She disappeared herself, Suzanne shouts back, Donghyun's hand on her arm holding her behind him. She escaped you. Temporarily, Jaewon smiles. But I've been patient. I funded your father's cancer treatments through a shell charity. 12 months of keeping him alive just so I'd have leverage when you finally surfaced. I've owned your life for months, child. You just didn't know it. The words hit like a physical blow. Her father's survival, the mysterious donor that covered treatments when insurance failed, it was all Jaewon. All manipulation. All leverage. You're the last witness, Jaewon continues, raising his weapon. The last person who can connect me to that night. Your grandmother should have stayed gone. You should have stayed invisible. He aims. Suzanne sees it happening in slow motion, Chaewon's finger tightening on the trigger, the barrel pointed at her chest. No time to run, no time to hide. Donghyun moves. He throws himself in front of her, just as Chaewon fires. Once, twice, 3 times. Blood sprays. Donghyun staggers, his body taking rounds meant for her. Shoulder, ribs, thigh. He collapses against her, and Suzanne screams, catching him as he falls. But even bleeding, even dying, Donghyun raises his weapon with shaking hands and fires. 1 shot. Center mass. Chaewon drops, his eyes wide with shock, blood blooming across his chest. He tries to speak, but only blood comes out. Then he's still. Donghyun, stay with me! Suzanne tears off her jacket, pressing it against the worst wound, his ribs, where blood pulses hot and fast. Tae-sung, get the van! Now! Donghyun's hand finds hers, slick with blood. The evidence. Did we get it? We got it. All of it. You saved it. You saved me. Tears blur her vision. Don't you dare die. You hear me? Don't you dare! Worth it, he whispers in Korean, his eyes starting to close. You were worth dying for. Then live for me instead. Tae-sung appears, helps her drag Donghyun into the van. They peel out of the garage, corrupt cops scattering, the evidence bag clutched in Suzanne's blood-stained hands. In the back of the speeding van, Suzanne keeps pressure on Donghyun's wounds, counting his shallow breaths, refusing to let him slip away. Because 40 years ago her grandmother ran from violence and spent a lifetime hiding, Suzanne isn't running, she's fighting. And she's not losing the only family she has left. Not tonight, not ever. Donghyun survives the surgery, but barely. 3 bullets removed, 14 units of blood transfused, 72 hours in critical condition before his eyes finally open in the penthouse recovery room overlooking Koreatown. Suzanne is there when he wakes. She's been there for 4 days straight, sleeping in the chair beside his bed, refusing to leave until she knows he'll live. You're still here, he whispers, his voice rough from intubation. Where else would I be? He tries to sit up, winces, settles back against the pillows. You should have taken the money and disappeared. That was always the plan. Whose plan? Mine. Dong-hyun meets her eyes, and for the first time, she sees him completely unguarded. I knew about you before the restaurant. I'd been watching you for months, trying to decide if I should approach you or protect you by staying away. The insult that night, it wasn't rage. It was a test. I needed to know if you'd break your cover, if you were strong enough to survive in my world. Suzanne's breath catches. You've been manipulating me from the beginning. I've been trying to save you from the beginning. Your grandmother's past, your family connection, it made you a target. I thought if I could hire you, control the situation, keep you close, I could protect you from Chaewon. His hand finds hers, weak but steady. I didn't expect to care whether you lived or died. That wasn't part of the plan. And now? Now I took 3 bullets for you. I think that answers your question. Suzanne squeezes his hand, tears she didn't know she was holding spilling over. The evidence. We found something else. A trust fund your grandfather set up for my mother. $4.2 million, managed by a third party. Someone buried it. Someone made sure we never knew. Dong-hyun's jaw tightens. Jaewon's father. He controlled the organization after the murder. He would have had access to all financial records. My family was never supposed to suffer. My father's cancer, my mother's care, River's instability, all of it could have been prevented if someone hadn't stolen what was rightfully ours. Suzanne's voice hardens. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to recover. We're going to use that evidence not to destroy the Gwangju faction, but to force them into legitimate business. And we're going to rebuild your organization into something that doesn't require blood to function. Dong-hyun almost smiles. You're giving me orders now? I'm giving you a choice. Take my help and transform this empire, or I walk away and you face the remaining factions alone. That's not much of a choice. It's the only one you're getting. He studies her face, this woman who survived his world and somehow made it better. What do you want, Suzanne? I want my son to grow up safe. I want my parents cared for. I want my grandmother's legacy to be something other than fear and violence. She leans closer. And I want you to prove that blood doesn't have to be destiny. Then we do it together. Partners. Equals. Dong-hyun's grip tightens on her hand. But I have one condition. Which is? Marry me. Suzanne blinks. You almost died 4 days ago and you're proposing? I almost died saving you. That entitles me to at least ask. He shifts, reaching for something on the bedside table. Not a ring, a folded document. This is a deed, a restaurant space in your grandmother's name, Halmoni's table. I bought it 3 weeks ago, before the vault, before Chaewon. I was going to give it to you after the job ended, whether you stayed with me or not. Suzanne unfolds the deed with shaking hands. The address is in Queens, near the temple where her grandmother used to pray. The deed lists the owner as Park Ji-won Memorial Foundation. You did this for me? I did this because someone should honor what she sacrificed. And because you deserve a place to teach the language she gave you. A place where her legacy is culture, not crime. Suzanne kisses him, gentle, careful of his injuries, but certain. Yes, to all of it. The restaurant, the partnership, the completely insane proposal from a man in a hospital bed. Technically a penthouse recovery room. Still insane. 8 weeks later, the Gwangju faction signs a treaty. The evidence forces them to the table, but Suzanne's terms keep them there. Legitimate import-export ventures, cultural consulting businesses, translation services for international corporations. The crime family doesn't disappear. It transforms. The Hwang Poli Foundation launches with an endowment of $8 million. Cancer research, dementia care facilities. Scholarships for children of immigrant families. River's name is on the first scholarship. Her parents' names are on the research wing. Her father lives another 6 months, long enough to see Suzanne married in a traditional Korean ceremony at a queen's temple. Long enough to hold her hand and whisper, "Your grandmother would be proud." Her mother has good days and bad days. On a good day, she recognizes Suzanne in her wedding hanbok and cries with joy. On bad days, she thinks Suzanne is her own mother, back from the dead. Suzanne and Donghyun exchange vows in Gyeongsang dialect, the language of their grandmothers, promising to break cycles and build futures. Taesung stands as best man. River carries the rings, grinning in his traditional hanbok. 1 year later, Suzanne stands in Halmoni's table, teaching Korean to a classroom full of immigrant children. She's explaining the difference between formal and casual speech when she notices Donghyun in the doorway, watching with that quiet intensity he never quite lost. "How long have you been standing there?" she asks in Korean. "Long enough to remember why I took those bullets." He walks over, kisses her forehead. "Your grandmother would have loved this. She would have loved that we survived. More than that. She would have loved that we transformed what tried to kill us into something that gives life." Outside, the city hums. Inside, children laugh and learn a language that once meant danger but now means connection. An empire built on violence has become a foundation for healing, and Suzanne Poli, once invisible, once desperate, once drowning, stands in the center of it all and teaches the next generation that languages aren't just weapons. Sometimes they're keys to futures worth fighting for. Drop your thoughts below, and if you haven't yet, hit subscribe so you're here for the next video.